Hello everyone, and welcome to Writehive 2025. I'm Bradley, and I will be your moderator for the reality versus fiction life of pirate presentation. And I'm here with RM Beatrice. Uh, Beatrice is a profound lover of love and self-proclaimed son of the old gods. He is a hyphenated, two-spirit best-selling author of romance filled with mythology, fairy tales, and folklore. He currently resides in Nevada on unceded Nuwiri lands. I'm sorry if I butcher the term. When not writing, RM can be found watching horror movies, playing RPG video games, or filing down our research rabbit hole. Speaking of horror movies, have you watched Sinners?
No, I haven't seen it yet. No.
Ah, it's a good film.
Yeah, I don't usually go to the movies. I just wait for them to come out.
Fair enough. I was invited to a press screening, so anyway, to go back to the subject of about the rituals, we basically uh, discuss how uh, the repression of pirates differentiate from reality and what authors decide to take that approach, basically. So first question, what are some of the tropes we see in pirate depictions that stray away from reality?
So there are quite a few, a lot of which have been popularized through fiction, different kinds of media, different mediums. Um, and they're pretty much the ones that you know best, which is like walking the plank. A lot of pirates probably didn't deal with that or mess with that or take time out of their day to do all of that. They could just kill people outright. Um, and probably did, prefer that. Obviously, a media like Peter Pan, I think the Robinson Crusoe author, Daniel Defoe, he had talked about walking, put walking the plank in his books, but it ultimately probably wasn't something that pirates did. There's only been like a few accounts of people reporting that on ships. It was much later than the golden age of piracy, and it wasn't for sure. Like nobody could prove that it was true, like a true thing that happened. Other than that, there's like a lot of like the pirate dress that we see. It's a lot like the face of Jesus, where like artists kind of took this concept and kept doing it and doing it and doing it until we had like this common concept or idea of what pirates look like. And obviously they probably didn't always look like that. Same with like peg legs, the eye patches, things like that. Like were there obviously disabled people at sea? 100%. It's like a job, hazard of the job. You're probably gonna lose a limb. You're probably gonna lose an eye or a hand, or et cetera, et cetera. But it wasn't like they were cutting off people's legs at the at the rate of which we see pirates with peg legs and hooks for hands, um, eye patches, things like that. Like it was more of just like the commonality of the times. Just like people would lose body parts. Like it was the thing that happened, especially in a job like a pirate. So it was something that happened a lot. Um, I think there's also kind of like obviously with things like pirates, Vikings, things like that. There is like a glorified part, many glorified parts of like their past, how they did things. Um, they probably weren't attacking the most wealthiest of Spanish ships just based on how much like how well guarded they were. Pirate crews probably weren't hitting like the most wealthiest of ships unless those ships like wrecked, were in a vulnerable position. Um, but they definitely weren't like taking on the biggest of ships in the ocean at the time. Um, Other than that, I mean, there's like just there are smaller aspects I think that do, they might have happened, they might not have happened. There are a lot of aspects of pirate life that we really don't have, written records for or proof that they occurred, but those are kind of the big ones just because obviously those are the ones you see the most in modern media today even. But just like in general, Treasure Island did a lot for fictional pirates. Pirates of Penzance did a lot for fictional pirates. I think, Pirates of Penzance actually kind of popularized the skull and crossbone hats, like the hats that we assume pirates are wearing all the time, and they probably weren't wearing that all the time, So just a lot of things that looks like they had to be made in bulk, like that probably wasn't happening, at the time. So yeah, those are probably the biggest ones that I have.
Yeah, basically a lot of elements that were basically isolate but amplify.
Right,
And
right.
yeah, okay. But so as opposite, what did fiction get right about the depiction of pirates?
I think like the lifestyle was probably very similar. They were obviously the point of piracy. Even if media doesn't always cover the roots of the problems or the socioeconomic uh situations that these people are in. They kind of obviously glorify the adventurous parts of it, but they were obviously on the sea. They were attacking ships. They were flying false flags, or also their flags depicting death or the Jolly Roger. That they would do that. Also a big thing, a big aspect in pirate media that I've seen, basically, because again, I'm an Assassin's Creed kid, so this is where a lot of my historical, I guess, my historical knowledge doesn't so much start, but where I get that interest in these different histories, and piracy is one of them. But like Nassau in the Bahamas, kind of being like this big, I wouldn't say a haven, but it's very much a huge hub um, for piracy that it was. I think a lot of media does get that right to some extent. Um, the shipwrecks, the attacks on Spanish ships. Um, every now and again, obviously, we do get to see the ties between um, enslaved people and piracy, and how they get roped into that. Also, not as it's not as shown as it should be, as it was happening realistically, but it's still something that does every once in a while we get a pretty good depiction of it, I'll say. Um, but those are probably the biggest things that I would say are they get right. I know that there was the show Black Sails. I didn't finish it, but I know that in there they kind of have Nassau being really big, a big setting. Also, Assassin's Creed did have it also as a big setting, so I think that that was really important to me, just because again, like a lot of my where I started my journey was kind of reading about piracy in the Caribbean. Like, that's obviously where we usually go to, especially trying to find out more about the ties between slavery and enslaved people and piracy. And even like talking about modern piracy, like that's kind of where my research started, just because okay, that's where it kind of ended for the historical idea of pirates. Um, but other than that, I mean, I think the lifestyle has been more or less. There are major aspects of the lifestyle. It's not easy. You're constantly at sea. And you're constantly at sea because I mean, you're not really allowed in ports and hubs the way NASA was a big. Um, it was a big exception to the rule in that most places are not putting out the welcome wagon for pirate ships. Like that's just not happening. Um, but I think that that was like a big thing for me, just to kind of have the setting be correct, but we're not necessarily like every relationship between the people, the systems that play at the time. Like if you're not getting that, you're at least getting the setting right most of the time. So there's that. I'll give it that.
By the way, speaking of Assassin's Creed, I actually have a poster of Black Flag on my wall.
I did. I had one too, and now I'm like, I just moved, and I'm like, I never found it. And I was thinking about that today. I was like, I never found the poster. Now I'm kind of upset because I have no idea where it is. But I definitely had that one. I think the last one I got was like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and they were all in a row. But definitely one of my favorite games of all time was Black Flag for sure.
Another question, since we are the subject by debunking pirates trope, did pirate really say the thing we say on talk like a pirate?
Again, there's a lot of different, reports or people saying that okay, we've heard this, we've heard that. For me, just based on what I've, and again, I'm not the pirate expert by any means necessary, so nobody get mad at me, but I'm gonna say no. Just based on the fact like there really wasn't a recognized language for pirates specifically. And again, these are a bunch of people that are coming from different walks of life. Not to say that there wasn't, I'm sure that, different ships worked in the way that communities sometimes do, where you come up with your own speech or vernacular. You develop ways of talking to each other, but overall, there wasn't like a general um, or a generic pirate speech. A lot of them had different. These most of them are grown, so a lot of them have their own accents from wherever they came from, British accents or uh, what had developed by then in the Caribbean and on eastern shores of Turtle Island, and how it, it might have developed. There might have been languages or I'd say, let's say extensions of languages that might have developed. But overall, I would say it's probably nothing like what we talk like or what people talk like on Talk Like a Pirate Day. They're definitely like I don't have a record of like something that was fixed, words that were fixed, the language that was fixed. I think there was a lot of language that kind of, again, as I mentioned earlier, Disney's Treasure Island did a lot for fictional pirates. Um, Long John Silver in that movie, a lot of his language kind of um, that's what it looks like. That's what we think of, and it probably did come from that depiction a lot because it's a Disney depiction. It's a very widespread depiction. It's something that a lot of people saw. So I think that media like that, widespread media like that, or well-known media like that, probably had a lot more to do with how we see pirates speaking or how we envision them speaking more than pirates themselves, is what I would say.
So in that case, why do you think fiction changed some of the realities of pirate life?
To some extent, I would say that it does depend on the medium. So obviously Hollywood has a bigger I mean, they have more reason to glorify the more adventurous aspects. And I guess, fiction in general does. Um, but obviously, what you can write in a book or what you can cover in a book is a lot different than what you can cover in a movie. So for movies specifically, I would say it's a lot of glorification. It's a lot of trying to make it look like as lavish a life as you want it to look like. And I think it's the same way, they've kind of changed aspects of gladiator life, of ancient Greek life, Spartan life, Viking life. Um, there are you know, so many instances where you have, variations of what they choose to put in these depictions. Why do why do they show piracy the way it is with this, idea of freedom and being able to make your own decisions, whereas in reality a lot of people were forced into piracy. They were there was a lot of people, enslaved people. It was between being enslaved and being on a pirate ship, and they chose the pirate ship because slavery was horrible. And that also plays into it too, is how watered down slave history is. Nobody, except for Black people who have family or who have listened to elders who have talked about it, who lived through it, who had at least secondary accounts from their relatives. Nobody knows how bad it is because media, whether fiction or nonfiction, has never really been allowed to tell you how bad it is or how bad it was, um, and the extent to which the violence and the cruelty was towards enslaved Black people. So I think that like that also ties into it for me, because if you're picking between this and a life of piracy, where like if you get caught, and for Black people is if you get caught, you're likely getting sold back into slavery. You're likely ending up somewhere worse than you started. So it was not always a choice. It wasn't always like a huge choice, but obviously for fiction, you want to kind of romanticize the lifestyle that you're putting on screen or in a book. You want it to be more fun than it was. So you focus on the adventure, you focus on the excitement of, oh, we're stealing treasure and we're taking it back to the poor, or whatever aspect you want to focus on. But I think it is that thing of like they really don't want to talk about the bad parts. You want it to be very pretty and pristine, and you want people to be excited about it, and you want it to be this idea that it could have been better than what we have now, because everybody wants to escapism. Everybody loves escapism. That's really a huge thing, and then fiction has is a number one cleanup hitter for escapism. And so I think that a lot of fiction creators want to make it a place where you could escape. And so we cut out the bad parts and we pretend that those don't exist. And that can be really good for a minute, then it can be really bad long term, depending on who's deciding, 100 years from now that, hey, this fictional depiction was real. Like that's kind of like what you're up against at the end of the day. But at the time, in the moment, yeah, of course, everybody loves to go. Pirates of the Caribbean is still one of the largest movie series ever. Like it's beloved because of what it glorifies and what it makes piracy look like. So I think that's one of the major reasons that people go into it for. And then obviously there's like a more I it's kind of like the other aspect of that is just like the imagined white past. The reason why you'll see depictions, even newer shows that just cut out or even make light of the slavery involved, the racism involved, the systems at play at the time. Like those are really whitewashed and watered down because white people love to imagine a past where they weren't the bad guys, where they were the heroes, where they were heroes. And it's again the same in why they claim they descend from Vikings or descend from Spartans or just whatever they decided today they're descended from, Romans, etc., etc. Like they'll reclaim these imagined pasts because they want to be heroes. They want to be seen as superior, and that plays into pirate media as much as it plays into any other, you know, types of those media that I just named. And so that is one of the more, I mean, I guess the other aspect of it that people don't like to talk about, but it is, I mean, it's very documented as to how they take these histories and whitewash them and make them look the way that they look on screen because they want to believe that at some point they were the heroes. So I think that's another big thing that plays into that.
I kind of find it interesting that there are a lot of media that fantasize the idea of like going somewhere to explore the world, going somewhere and taking things from other people and claim it actuals. I don't know why specifically, but on that subject, what do you think you touch a lot about it, but what do you think attracts people to the fantasy view of pirates?
Yeah, I think yeah, it kind of plays into that. It's definitely the excitement, the adventure that the lifestyle promises, um, the escapism. Yeah, like there are aspects. Like I said, Assassin's Creed Black Flag, it's a really fun game. I really love that game. There were so many aspects of the game because they do, obviously it's not historically correct by any means, but there's, parts of it like, I was so enthused and enthralled with the diving bell. Like real like they used diving bells back then, you know what I mean, to get deeper underwater. Like that was amazing to me. So it's the thing of like these little things, they were of great interest, like what we see in the media. Um, but what really draws people in is just your treasure, like gold. It's shiny. Gold is so shiny, and the pirate ships were amazing. I think I remember having one of my favorite Christmas presents of all time was a pirate ship, a Lego pirate ship that I got to build, and that was like, this is so cool. Like, you know what I mean, just like the aesthetic of it. Yeah, I can see why, everybody dresses up as pirates at least once in their lifetime, or, whatever. And it's having like a pirate crew, because at the end of the day, we're very social creatures who want community and want a team or what have you. So I think that aspect also draws people in, of like you get a pirate crew and it's like a family that you make on your own. And because, in fiction, found family is a huge trope, and it's one of my favorite tropes. So just the idea of like you get to go out on the seven seas and get treasure and make friends and have these people, and probably wasn't as beautiful as we imagine it to be, but if you can sit there and imagine it that way, of course it's going to draw you in. It's going to be one of those things where you're like, yeah, this seems like a really fun um life to have, or the idealization of it. I think it's very easy to see why people are attracted to it because of that, like just what the tropes that fiction uses to kind of create this pirate past. They each individual one can draw people on its own, to put that all together, and yeah, it seems like a really fun place to go in fiction.
It's funny you talk about the fun family trope. It's something that is very big theme in the anime of the One Piece. Although their depiction of pirates is at a completely different level. At its core, there is a strong crew of people who were basically alone and despised by the world, who were able to form family together inside the Straw Hat crew.
Okay, maybe I'll watch it. Maybe I'll watch that. Yeah, and I've
I
heard
was
good things, but I just don't. TV watching for me is so difficult at any given time.
yeah,
So
I always suggest to people to read One Piece rather than watch it because 100 manga volumes is easier to digest than 1100 episodes.
that is true. Yeah, that's definitely true. That's probably best for me, I would say.
Yeah. Or watch the Netflix live action. That could work too.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot that that came out. Yeah,
How do pirate tropes compare to modern day pirates?
I think those are. It's such a disconnect in fiction, specifically. I haven't really seen modern depictions of slavery. I mean, sorry, of slavery, of of slavery either, but definitely of piracy. Um, I would say, on the what they have in common would be there are similar socioeconomic roots. The goals might have changed. The goals are very different. Um, for example, for me, in Mexico, we do have piracy. There are certain bodies of water that people know not to go towards, around, to be careful around or in, just because there are drug cartels that will use those bodies of water, and rivals will also use those bodies of water, and so things kind of can escalate or turn into what we would think of. They do think of it as piracy. It's considered piracy. Um, but it's definitely not. I don't think people are capable of romanticizing the modern aspects as well as they were the historical aspects, because obviously there were some highlights to piracy back then, when you if you thought about it in the way of like, oh well, they're freeing slaves and they're raiding plantations and they're you know you can see them into in some aspect. You can see how they would be the good guys in that time. You would understand why it was so important for business owners, plantation owners, to get rid of pirates. Like, you could understand why they were such a danger to the systems at play at the time. Now I think it's harder to do that. It's definitely harder to do that because they're not really. I mean, at least for me, if I'm looking at it, for me as an indigenous person um, to Mexico, uh, they're harming people, and my communities are coastal communities. Granted, the western coast, so I don't know if we deal with it as much on the seas, but they we do have those same cartels constantly invading our lands, constantly having our people having to fight against them. We're constantly, our people are constantly getting attacked by these same people, and they're intertwined to us because we understand that the piracy that they're doing elsewhere funds the violence that they're inflicting on our people to from day to day. And so for me, it would be really hard to kind of look at, if somebody were to write a romance about a modern pirate, I'd kind of be like, what are you doing? Like, what? I don't know how this is going to play out, and I don't think I want to know. And it's kind of the same because like I don't read or write like mafia romance, like because I obviously the mafia is still a very big thing in Italy, and it's a very like stark evil. It's exploitative. It's dangerous. It's these same things that it to be, but fiction likes to you know water down or take out or pretend doesn't exist. So it's the same thing, I think, in that aspect of like people like to romanticize these systems again without taking into account who they actually harm on a day-to-day basis, like in real life right now today, because we like to pretend like they don't exist anymore. So I think that people have done the same thing with piracy of like it doesn't exist anymore. And yeah, sure, it doesn't exist the way it did when we were writing, Treasure Island and things like that about it. It doesn't exist like that anymore. Nobody's walking around in bandanas or skull and crossbow and whatever. Like that's not something that's happening often today. Um, I can only think of really one depiction of like modern piracy, and it was the movie with the guy from Toy Story. I never watched it, but it was just like
Uh,
the image.
is
Um,
it the one? Is it sorry? Is it the one with the meme? Look at me, I'm the captain
yes,
now. Ah, okay,
yes,
yeah,
and
I
like
know.
that's it's like a to see that image and have that image be so big for that, because that's the only image I can tell you. I can point to that image and be like, that's from that film. I have no idea about anything else in the film because it was such a stark. I don't like the image of like having black pirates and then this one of the nicest actor white guys you've ever seen. Just because I knew him from Toy Story, I think that's what my idea was. I know nothing about him otherwise. But it's like to see that, and it was kind of like, yeah, I get it. Like it's a very big issue in the location that it was set in, and obviously it was a real thing that happened. But it's like that's all we've gotten about modern piracy. Like we don't talk about how it's actually affecting people in real time. That was it was again still such a like Hollywood glorified kind of hero story. Like, you know what I mean? And that's not what's happening every day. The reality is pirates are a big issue today and they are hurting real people. And you don't hear about those stories unless it's a hero story, right? So I think that they've become more selective with the narratives that they want to put on screen or adapt, because they want, that's the only way you can glorify it now, is you have to find like this one-off, you know, thing that happened, like this event that happened, and everybody loves it based on a true story, right? You know, everybody loves that. But it's like, well, what about the other stories that aren't as glorified? You know, they're not as, you know, romanticized. They're real and they're raw and they're harsh. And that's the reality of people who struggle, the people who are victimized by piracy in the modern age. And it's much harder to come up with like cutesy little tropes when you have like, they're real people. Like, they are people that, you know, you see or that are, now we're not, you know, you're not worried about like, oh, they're just out on the ocean. Like, no, they actually probably are doing violence on land too, and then going out and doing it because it's, you know, obviously with the, you know, you've got to think about like the development of technology. The modes have changed, the way that they do things have changed. You know, they have their own boats now, they don't have to just steal boats. Like, you know what I mean? It's a much more, I would say, structured mode of piracy that we have today. It serves varying purposes depending on the area that it's happening in, but it is happening, you know, all over. You know, not just Somalia, but like West Africa, the Caribbean, you know, Mexico. There are so many places that are impacted by modern piracy, but we just don't see that because it's just not something that you're not escaping very well. If you're using modern slavery, like, it's the escapism part of that isn't as large as it was for the golden age of piracy, which already sounds cool on its own. So of course you're going to go there rather than today, where, you know, it's cartels, you know, doing things like that. So I think that's one of like the big things that differs in how, um, like how we kind of have taken those two separate ages of piracy or ideas of piracy, and they become so separated and so different from each other, is because we don't want to admit that they're the same thing, because then how can you glorify the past without reckoning with the present, right? But if you keep them as two separate things, you really don't have to reckon with that. So I think that's why people kind of try to make them differ so much.
Yeah, it's also true that we don't necessarily see that much modern depiction of piracy, because even today, when we usually talk about piracy, we usually mean like online piracy, not like actual physical
Right, exactly.
piracy. Yeah, and it's even true that it's like fiction have a tendency to glory to when they made a story about a criminal or like another crime, they also have to say sometimes to like desensitize you know the impact of the on the victims. Or usually it's a should of a victim, it's usually someone in power that deserve it. Even if sometimes those type of people usually go after like other people who struggle as well, and not necessarily against the establishment. But
Right.
it's
And
better for
yeah,
the hero
yeah,
story too.
that's a big thing, because yeah, it's like it's harder to make them into heroes. Modern pirates, like, it's much harder to make them into heroes because they're not, you know, raiding plantations. They're not saving anybody from slavery. That's not what's happening. If anything, it's the other way around, because now, yeah, they're a force in and of themselves. There's no, you know, obviously there are aspects of, there's still aspects of like, how does colonialism make this possible? 100%. I think colonialism has definitely made modern piracy more possible. Um, Not least of all, again, the advancement of technology, the scarcity of resources, or the hoarding of resources and wealth, et cetera, et cetera. Like, those are definitely true. But if you, I mean, if you're going to look at it in, oh, the lesser of two evils, like, I'm really not going to a cartel pirate ship is not going to be a lesser of two evils to me. Like, that's not a choice I have to make anymore. And I think that's one of the big things too, is just like, you're not having that. Like, this is a whole different thing. There is no, you know, competing evil, if you will. Like, it's an evil in and of itself, separate from anything else. In, and especially again for me, in Mexico, cartel violence and state violence go hand in hand. The two are intricately intertwined to help each other out, empower and uh, extend each other to lengths that they should never be able to extend to. And it, you know, amplifies the harm that's being done, especially on indigenous people there. So I think that that's really what it comes down to, is like you can't really separate it and say, oh, well, they're doing something good. They're, making somebody's life better. They're not. Like that's not something I can say for sure without a shadow of a doubt. Whereas you can say that to some extent about um, older piracy, about having getting slaves free, you raiding the plantations. You had like plantation owners had somebody to be afraid of. Now they kind of work for those people, so it's harder to be like, oh yeah, well, at least there's this, upside. I can't find an upside to modern piracy. I don't think fiction can either, and that's why they pretend it doesn't exist 9 times out of 10. So
Yeah. Yeah. In that case, is there something you wish you would see more in pirate fiction, or like something you would some aspect of history you think should explore more, or even more than pirates, or is there an element which change entirely?
I think, well, yeah, I would like to see the truth, which and that comes just from, if you do enough research on it, and because now again, it's hard for me to enjoy pirate media because I'm gonna sit there and be like, this is supposed to be like, this is about slavery, and you guys are singing and laughing and joking about it. Like this is not a serious take on the issues at hand 9 times out of 10. And obviously there are aspects, again, like if you're set out to make this show about pirates, but your focus is found family, this is great. But then if we can make this into such a, I guess, a fantasy depiction, just set it in another world, or don't set it in the Caribbean where you have to lie. You know what I mean? Like where you have to take out huge historical aspects to make this fun for you. And it usually is white writers, because they're the ones that tend to ignore it the most. It's not something that, unless they can be the hero, it didn't really affect them, and they were not the good guys at that time. Like that's just not the case. um and so I think it's a little bit difficult to ask, like, what would you want to see in pirate fiction, because again, at this point for me in my head, modern piracy and that piracy have kind of been bridged, and there's a lot missing in the literature, and so the literature would have to be filled in before we can hope for anything fictional to be of any merit. Well, I can hope for anything fictional to be of any merit, but I would like to see, Black Caribbean indigenous people be able to tell their stories, or be able to, have their ideas, or, if they want, if they found escapism in these pirate stories and they want to tell their own, 100%, I think they should be able to do that. I think I would love to read more about, how that, how piracy might have been for them. Like there were a lot of black pirates. About a third of the pirates during the golden age were black. So it's not like it's this small uh cops of people or black people that were involved. That's not true. um but there the I guess the what I would say is the experience for a black pirate versus a white pirate in the golden age was definitely different. It was different in life and it was different in death. Like, if, again, as I said earlier, if you were a black pirate and you got caught, odds are you're getting sold back into slavery, which for a lot of them was worse than death. A white pirate was going to get hanged. Like, they were going to get killed right off the bat. You're done. Like, you've lived the life, it's over, it's done. And instead, black people had to go back into hell basically and live out that. It's like, to think about that and how that would have an effect. Like, what did that look like to people who thought that piracy was a legit way to get out? And you imagine somebody or somebody you create this bond with. They went into piracy and had to come back out and went back into slavery. Like that's a really big, what is that like? How does that how does your life change after that? How do you look at your life? You know what I mean? Um, how do you continue? What are your, what is that experience like? I think that would be most interesting to me, of just like seeing how it actually was for Black Indigenous pirates, like, and how it affected, like, in the eastern states, that side of the country. What was it like to, for natives to what were the experience like for them? What was the contact like for them? I think there's so many questions that I would have that I'd rather read than the same Treasure Island, Pirates of the Caribbean, et cetera, et cetera. Like, okay, we get it. It was really cool. Treasure, sword fights. Yes, we get it. Love it. Fantastic. Now, let me hear from those that didn't have not been heard from. And I think that was one of like my favorite things too, because obviously the Assassin's Creed DLC for Black Flag was about the formerly enslaved black pirate that was on the ship, um, during the game. So he had a whole DLC to himself, and I think that was kind of cool. Obviously, they've come a long way in their depictions of like, I mean, just in depictions of, I guess, black and brown people, like not just the white protagonist. They've come a way. We'll give them that. A way. Not great. Not, there's nothing like, I'm not going to give them an award or anything, but I think at that time, though, being a kid and not really having that representation and glorified pasts like that, that was kind of, monumental to me, because it's like, holy shit, like it's a black guy, like it's a black pirate and he gets his own DLC. So I think that was like something really important to me, and I think I might enjoy pirate fiction more if that was something that people focused on, with just being able to see black and non-black indigenous people tell their stories, about whether it's the truth or whether it's like the same glorified, because we haven't seen a lot of books like that from non-white authors, or a lot of media from non-white directors, producers, et cetera. Like I would like to see that, and I think that there's still openings for that. So I would vote for that. If anybody is listening to me and is actually interested in making more media that I'm asking for, it would definitely be that.
Raconte, just like, but yeah, and also something that's so fun, uh, that coming a lot in a lot of like horror story is that it's all focused on the same time period, in the same area, and piracy history is way longer than that, and touch many more countries, and many more ethnicities, whether it's like Scandinavian or like Asian or like African. There is many things that could be like explored, I think, just by changing the settings, not just
Literally.
really change the dynamic, versus like just keep back about okay, we get it.
Yeah, and that's
And
what, like, there's so many aspects that just haven't been touched. And it's like they've kind of honed in on this period, but again, like, you've honed in on a period you don't want to be honest about. So if you don't want to be honest about it, and you just want, you could literally change the setting to anywhere or nowhere that exists in the world, and already be more historically accurate, and b, you don't like, it's more fun for the people who know the truth. Like you've covered that. And
yeah,
most people don't want to do that for some reason, and I don't know why. But
yeah, I mean, at least the treasure planet is set on space, so you can't
exactly.
complain about
See?
that
And
accuracy.
how many people love that movie? Like, yeah, there were so many things that you could do. Space piracy. And I do feel like there have been, I definitely know there's been at least, like, there's got to have been at least two or three episodes of Star Trek with space piracy, right? So it's not impossible or unheard of. Like, let's just get a little creative. That's all I'm asking. Like, that's
Yeah,
it.
I mean, there is even a movie of Dragon Ball Z that also start space pirate with BoJack.
Yeah, see, it's possible. It is absolutely possible. Sky is the limit, literally. So let's just try that out.
But to close the panel, is there historical a pirate that you find interesting, that you think should be explored more?
So again, I and also too, this is like my thing is like having historical pirates. I'm always this because everybody's like, well, they may or may not have been real, and that's true for a lot of the pirates that I've personally been drawn to. It's like, well, may have existed, they may not have existed, and that's okay. Um, because again, I'm more fiction than anything when it comes to pirates. But like Black Caesar was a big thing, obviously, because he's like the most famous of black pirates. And there were so many different stories about him. And I think that also did depend on like the area. Like I'm sure Caribbean people have heard different stories than I've heard about Black Caesar, right? And also like black people from other places in the diaspora have probably heard different stories about him. And it's the same for like you know, Mary Reed, but even just women pirates in general. Um, and I always thought that was cool, just for like the minority or marginalized of the pirates. I always were drawn to because that's who I was, and and like where I was in life of like being not not the front of the class, not not whatever you. I'm not gonna. I just didn't like attention that way. So I was always drawn to like the pirates that were lesser known because then also too, if you think because like for again being a fiction writer, if you're gravitating towards lesser known figures, there's more you can do with them fictionally. Um, and one more time, Assassin's Creed had a lot of those pirates involved. But again, we don't know how much of not even just in Assassin's Creed, but just like in the records we have of them, of Mary Reed, of Blackbeard, of all these different pirates that we know, and everybody knows these names, but we don't actually know how much of their lives that we have been told is real or not real. So I think that would be more of my whether I have a not necessarily a favorite historical pirate because I'm always like, what if I said that? And it's like they're not even real, bro. Like that's was always my fear. So my thing would be more of like what my favorite stories, or like the favorite tall tales or what have you, or favorite depictions of them, um, that I've seen. And obviously, like, yeah, Blackbeard is so cool. And I think Black Caesar was so cool. Just the stories that I've had, and then obviously, um, Kid and Mary Reed in Assassin's Creed. Like I was very drawn to them, um, especially Kid because I mean, being a trans kid child, not to differentiate, but like Kid was basically it did seem very transmasculine coded to me. So that was really important to me. And I was really drawn to her depiction in Assassin's Creed. Um, and then, of course, Adewale was the black former slave that became a pirate. But I think those stories were probably the most drawing to me just because it was like that was legit freedom. You were talking about, the most one of the most glorified aspects of pirate life was this freedom of choice, and these people were shown to like literally legitimately make that choice to be pirates and to escape whatever hardships that being a woman or being black, etc., were they whatever they faced that was different from their white cisgender heterosexual counterparts, male counterparts. So I was always drawn to those stories more, just because like I could see myself in them more. So overall, like bottom line, I don't really have a favorite historical pirate, but I do love a lot of depictions of the underdog pirate, the marginalized pirate, the just the pirates that decided, hey, you know what? Life in fucking wherever I am is not that great. So I'm gonna join a pirate crew and it's gonna be better for me because I'm gonna make sure it is. And I really do like that aspect of pirate fiction in general, but like definitely those specific stories of like it's actually a choice to be free. because who doesn't want that to be true on any given day of the week, right? So
I would say for me, there's a lot of interesting. I would say two I would like to mention. I might butcher the name, sorry. One is a Chinese female pirate called Qing Qi. I'm pretty sure I butchered the name, so yeah, I will write it down on the chat. Was like a pretty big pirate during days. There are also a Scandinavian pirate. I think her name is Alvida or something like that. She actually is the inspiration of one of the first main antagonists in One Piece, who's also who is named after her. A lot of pirates in One Piece are named after famous pirates, like Kid, Black Bear,
yeah.
Law, like Storm. So Avida that is like a famous one. So yeah. So that's also two that fun. Interesting. Again, another one that you are used to.
Yeah, I think I definitely want to, now that you've mentioned it, like I definitely do want to do more reading research on like other parts of the world. Um, there were, I don't know if that was the one I was thinking of. There was like a, I think she was Chinese, um, a pirate, but I cannot think of her name. And I didn't really, I was focused obviously on the Caribbean for this talk. So,
Yeah.
but I definitely want to do more research on that just because, yeah, like how different it was because you didn't have the same, obviously, like you probably didn't have the same socioeconomic um, motivations or even like the same political motivations from different parts of the world. Like those alone had to very much make it different how it operated on those parts of the world. So I definitely want to learn more about that. That's what it's like. That part is what interests me most about pirates is just like the actual historical realities of why are you doing this? How did you decide to do this? Why was this the answer to you? Like I think that's really what motivates me to keep reading about them. So I definitely want to do that. Look into more of those worldwide pirates to see how it differs.
Do you have any last thoughts? And is there anything you want to plug to our viewers?
I think I covered everything I wanted to say. I do want to say again though, like if anybody comes and if you know more than I do, or you have anything to add, please feel free to when we meet for the actual conference. I'm always open to learning, and I'm also open to if anybody has articles on worldwide piracy. I did ask all my Twitter friends before this to just send me articles, which is probably a bad idea because then I had a ton of articles that I haven't gotten through all of them. But anyway, always interested in articles and reading materials, so feel free to pitch me those. But also as far as plugging, you can find me at rmvirtues.com. Um, you can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads, I think is the other one. I don't do social media well anymore. But you can find me at all those places. Also, RM Virtues, also on Patreon, RM Virtues. And you can find all my books on my website as well as sign up for my newsletter.
All right. Thank you, RM. And thank you all for watching this video. If you are live during service, RM will be there to answer any question. And I will be here. That will be here to moderate as well. And other than that, have a great rest of your conference, and see you next time.
Thank you.